Hello, everyone. My name's Matt Harrison. I am a colleague of Michael and Gina at the University of Melbourne, and my work is really around something called the Neurodiversity Project, which is a project that's run by myself and co-led by myself and two colleagues, Dr. Sarah Templey and Dr. Jess Reardon. But it's really much broader than that, as Michael said. It's really about all our neurodivergent community at the University of Melbourne coming together and saying that we are here, we've always been here, neurodivergent students and staff, and working together to make, we hope to build a university that is more inclusive of everyone. Whether you're neurodivergent, neurotypical, a place where everyone can be themselves and unmask, which is such a nice connection to today's theme. I'm just going to share my slides now, and I'll just check that everyone can see them. Can you see the slides? Yay, that's nice. Fantastic. So yes, hello. So I'm speaking today just briefly about the University of Melbourne's Neurodiversity Project, and really just, I'd like to just, first of all, just to celebrate the work of my colleagues, Dr. Jess Reardon, Dr. Sarah Templey. A bit like Michael was just saying about the advisory group meetings, working with Sarah and Jess has really allowed me just to be more myself, and it's given me a bit more confidence to be able to, as a neurodivergent academic, just really to really be a bit more, I guess, vocal in asking for what I need, but also just to meet other people who have similar life journeys, and to be able to talk openly about things that for a long time we just didn't talk about. I'd like to just quickly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of Australia and just pay my respects. My background, I'm a teacher. I was first a primary school teacher and then a secondary school teacher, so I always like just to celebrate 65,000 years of teaching in Australia, which is fantastic to be able to build on that legacy. And I also like to always invite people, just do whatever you need. If you need to STEM, it's absolutely fine. I use identity first language like Michael and Gina, but I know other people have different preferences. So I always just say, I'll use identity first language, but I'm very okay with people can identify however they want to identify. That's fine. So I like structure. It won't surprise you. I need, as an ADHD, structure is really my friend. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Neurodiversity Project, just for 5 minutes to talk about what is it exactly and why do we exist. And then I'm going to share some results from our staff needs analysis that was led by my colleague, Dr. Sarah Templey. And I'll share my contact details at the end if people have other ideas. I don't want to I don't want to go into someone else's time, so I'll try to stick to my timing quite closely. So yes, there we are. Dr. Jess Reardon, Dr. Sarah Templey, and myself. We all have slightly different roles. Jess looks after staff and student wellbeing. Sarah does a lot of the community education work, and I look at the teaching side. But we started off with these very delineated roles, and we found that I'm a massive nerd, I should say, and I love gaming. So I like multiplayer gaming, playing with other people. So we do a lot of co-op work where the three of us will work closely together on projects. We also luckily have a lot of our community who work with us closely. And so our whole purpose as a neurodiversity project is to be able to empower our community and to help the University of Melbourne to become a global leader in neurodiversity, inclusive research and practice. And that includes trauma-informed practice. It also is about addressing some of the historical practices at the university, and I'd say recent history, that haven't been inclusive, and have open dialogues with people about what things we can do to make our place of work and place of study just a safer place for everyone, and to be able to bring that feedback collectively. So it's not just one person out on the ledge, so to speak, but it's as a group saying, hey, I think we can do some things, more effectively. So we aim to build a stronger sense of community for our staff and students. We want to improve understanding of neurodivergent people across our university, particularly in teaching, but also just of our staff and students with our colleagues. And we want to connect our staff and students with each other and with the services at the university. I don't know what other organisations are like and people's experiences here at this conference of their own professional workplaces or settings, but the university has some really great things happening just we don't seem to be very good at communicating it to what's going on in different silos. So it's trying to break down some of those silos and just let people know what is out there. And we also want to conduct, we hope, world-leading neurodiversity affirming research. So today I'm talking about the staff needs analysis survey that Dr. Sarah Templey led. We've done a whole host of other work. We've worked with our Student Equity Disability Services Review. We've conducted a student needs analysis survey. We have the advisory group, which Michael spoke to earlier. We have resources and success stories of our website, because sometimes it is very, it can be a bit disheartening when you hear so many things that aren't working. And that's what I'll talk about in the staff needs analysis, is the experiences of our staff. And there are a lot of areas for improvement, but it is also nice to hear success stories as well. And I've had a lot of coffees. It's a slight exaggeration, 600,000 coffees, but it's probably pretty close. I'm probably getting close to that now. And just as Michael spoke to earlier and Juna spoke to earlier, there is just a range of experiences and such a diversity within our community. So we know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. It's actually listening to those stories and finding out where we have gaps and where we may not be, as a neurodiversity project, but also as a broader community, where we might be putting effort in and may not be actually having the impact that we want to have. So it's just that personal connection is just so important. So that's our neurodiversity project, and we're hoping to continue on to next year. We've been funded for 2 years, 2.5 years. But I'm going to share now some data from Dr. Sarah Templey. So Sarah asked our staff, both neurodivergent and neurotypical staff, about their knowledge around and experiences around neurodivergence and neurodiversity, and really had a look at questions around identity, disclosure, accommodations, demographics, but also thinking about, from a neurotypical perspective, where our neurotypical staff felt they needed support in better understanding how to be inclusive of our neurodivergent students and staff. So this is a fascinating survey. I thought it was super long and no one would complete it. I was wrong. I always go into every presentation of this data and always put my hand up and saying, I'm sorry, Sarah, I was wrong. We had 400 and something number of people, 432 staff fill the survey in completely, and took about an hour each person, but it gave us an amazing data set. We believe it's still the biggest in the world in a single institution, which gives us such a depth of data to be able to draw on. So in terms of what our community looks like, within that broad neurodivergence umbrella, the biggest population of neurotype within our staff are the ADHDers, then autistic staff, and then what's really interesting is we had a large number of staff identified with OCD, dyslexia, people with bipolar and mental health differences. What's really interesting is we found that a lot of our staff actually have more than one co-occurring neurotype. So we often joke that it's a buy one, get one free. If you have ADHD like me, you probably have some other neurological differences as well. And we always keep that in mind, that exactly the point that Juna and Michael made earlier, that if you met one neurodivergent person, their stories may be so different from someone else's. So when Sarah did her analysis, she broke it down. She loves categorizing things. She's very good at large data sets. She had a look, and what was really interesting was a lot of our neurotypical staff who completed the survey didn't identify as being neurodivergent, but they were unsure. They were in the process now. And I'm hoping that part of what the Neurodiversity Project does is take some stigma away from neurodivergence and allows people to feel safe to identify and to be able to, to be more self-accepting of who they are. And that's a big part of why we exist. What's really interesting is when we look at particularly autism, we did have a relatively high number of staff who self-identified. When we look at ADHD, there's a lot more people who went through with a formal diagnosis. And one reason for that is we know that if you have a formal diagnosis of ADHD, like I have, it gives you, it provides access to legalized and subsidized medication, stimulants, that can make a big difference. They make a huge difference for me. For autism, we know that there is some experimental medication around that will help with things like social anxiety, not just for autistic people, but we do know that a lot of autistic people do experience social anxiety. So we we'll see in the future more people looking for a formal diagnosis, but because there isn't a clear-cut benefit, we do see a lot of people in our community saying, hey, look, I identify as being autistic. I'm definitely sure I am, but there's no benefit to me actually going through and paying that money to go through that process. So in experiences disclosure, just some really interesting storylines here. 120 of our participants had disclosed to the manager, which you need to do to be able to get any sort of a formal adjustment or accommodation, but slightly less than half, 121, said no, which in itself is really telling that people don't feel like they want to disclose. When we started unpacking reasons why people had disclosed to their line managers, the biggest reason wasn't about accommodations and supports. That was actually the fourth most popular reason. It was to help others to understand me better, and that's really important. I think the idea that we just want to be understood, and we're not trying to be difficult, we're not trying to be rude, as the stereotype a lot of people would say, but it's really the idea that we can be, just so we get that understanding, and to say that, hey, our brains do process information differently, and that is okay. And I want to be understood. The second most popular reason, which ties in so nicely to today's theme for the conference, is so I don't have to mask. As Michael was saying, it's so nice just to be able to unmask. And I feel safe here. I can unmask, I can talk about my challenges with working memory, I can ask for things if I need them. But it's just that ability just to be yourself and to be able to, celebrate that. And the third one, to be able to self-advocate. It's not necessarily formally asking for accommodations, but to say, hey, I can be a leader. I can lead, and it may look slightly different from other leadership styles, but I want to be able to lead. I want to have opportunities, and I want to put my hand up for different roles that may not align with someone else's stereotype of what it is to have ADHD. So that's really important. When we asked why people didn't disclose, the biggest reason was worry about judgment and stereotyping. And again, coming back to opportunities, people worry about contracts not being extended. That's the second most popular reason, or not being promoted. And uncertainty about who it's safe to disclose to. It's so funny because I accidentally added myself on a form. The grant form, I ticked yes, do you have disability? I'd never talked about it before. I ticked yes, and my line manager was just wonderful about it. Was just like, hey, I just noticed you ticked yes on this form. And I was like, I didn't realize that she was going to read it. And I didn't. I was so grateful for just the way she handled it. It just wasn't a big deal. She's like, yeah, fantastic, that's great. And you'll if you need anything, come see me. And that was it. And that was like so nice. And she didn't change how she talked. She treated me. She just was always kind and just asked me if I needed anything and just made sure I was okay. And I think that is what a lot of us want, is just to be accepted for who we are, and just to be able to ask, be invited to ask if we need anything, but not having work taken off us, or assumptions being made about what we can and can't do, which is just really nice. So what's really interesting is when we talk about experiences with disclosure, most people have said that they've had really generally positive or more positive than negative experiences with students. Colleagues, generally positive experiences disclosing to colleagues, and the more mixed experiences with management. The reason we think it's more mixed for management is because you're usually asking for something. If you're disclosing to management, you're doing it for a reason. And if something's going well, and you want it to continue, or more often than not, something's not going well and your needs aren't being met, and you need to have that discussion around. So actually, I'm actually, an ADHDer. And this, makes it difficult for me, or the conditions aren't right for me to be able to be successful. And that can often be a more difficult conversation. In terms of accommodations, and I am aware of time, sorry, Michelle and Renee, just really quickly, the most popular accommodations that our staff at the University of Melbourne are asking for, our neurodivergent staff, are the ability to work flexibly, work from home, and the ability to go to somewhere quiet when needed. When we unpack that, for most people, the good news is, for most people now, they are able to do this. This is like that flexibility in attendance at meetings via Zoom is now pretty standard practice, I think, in most workplaces, in my state, in Victoria at least. And so not many people, actually only 2, needed to have it included in their adjustment plan. For 43 of the respondents, it was just that they didn't even have to frame it as an accommodation. It's just business as usual. Now, what is more interesting is something that I see as less, it's less, requires less change from manager, is the idea to go somewhere quiet when needed. And so a large number of respondents, 72, said they don't actually, they're afraid of asking for this, or they didn't ask for this, they don't do it, but they would benefit from it. And that's really interesting, is that idea that people, people don't want to ask for this, but they think they would benefit from it. So that in itself is telling. Maybe it comes back to that 50% who didn't feel safe to disclose for whatever reason, or didn't want to disclose for whatever reason. I think that in itself is worth investigation and thinking about what about culture makes it safe for us to drop the mask. Okay, so very interesting. Only 76 people from 224 people who had neurodivergent people who answered this question. All the questions were optional. 76 had requested at least one accommodation, but 148 hadn't asked for any accommodations. And this quote, I think is really quite telling, that I've not asked for any accommodations because I'm worried about not having my contract renewed. That's pretty simple and also pretty sad, but I understand that feeling. I don't even understand the current state. It's so inaccessible to request accommodations. When we looked at neurotypical and neurodivergent staff together, it's really interesting because people who basically, regardless of neurotype, want the same things. They want the ability to work flexibly from home. They want to be able to go quiet somewhere. And in the case of noise cancelling headphones, what's really interesting is a high number there saying that would benefit from that. And the ability to attend meetings by Zoom. There's more than neurodivergent people, which is really interesting. That option is, it's essential for some, but harmful for none, is the idea. The idea of universally designing our workplaces. So takeaways really are disclosure, neurodivergence. Many people are reluctant to disclose, and for a lot of good reasons. Disclosing to colleagues and students is generally better experience in disclosing to managers. And people want flexibility, quiet spaces, to be able to take breaks and generally have control of their environment, but people are hesitant to ask for accommodations. So improving the environment for everyone will actually improve the environment for neurotypical people as well as neurodivergent people. Thank you very much. There's our email address. I don't know whether you have time for questions or not.